around problems right today. Everybody is looking for problems to fix, right? And because you fix problems, it can be monetized. It is also solving a real problem in society. That is it. And so that just told us, that okay, let's solve some problems in computer, right? And then he also talked about things like generative AI. So I'm kind of taking both of them into consideration when I'm making this talk. Okay, there are no easy answers that I'm giving today, but I want you all to start thinking. When people say solve problems, right, or when we say let's solve problems, what are we talking about? How do we do it? Is the conventional way the right way? How do we really get there to solving problems in a better way, right? So I just want you to start thinking about the whole thing today. I'm just leaving you with probably more questions and a starting of a journey, rather than give you some end states today. So the first thing, right, when we talk about problems, so there is the problem on one hand, right? And then there is a solution on the other hand. How much time do we spend on the problem? And how much time do we spend on the solution? That's the first question. If you take a typical kind of problem solving process, right? We all seem to think we know the problem and we're ready to start on the solution. See, they've already given you problem statements. The police department's given you problem statements. The municipality's given you problem statements. The problem already is there. So let's start solving. Is that the way to go about it? No. Right? We typically, I would say that, problem space you spend as much time as you spend on the solution space. 50% of your time has to be devoted to understanding the problem. Truly understanding and even experiencing the problem, right? So this is the first, let's say, disruption let's bring into problem solving. Okay, that we spend more time on the problem, as much time on the problem as we do on the solution. And the second thing, I really want to say today is that, there are all kinds of problems. When we say problems, do we categorize a problem in our heads? See, there are incidental problems. I'm thirsty. I want go drink water. I'm tired. Go to sleep. I need to get there. Go there. Walk. Right? These are all incidental problems, which have very directed solutions, and but they are problems as well. So, can we learn from incidental problems? Incidental problems have a fascinating thing, right? They become part of life. So problem is not something that occurs once in a blue moon, or suddenly pops up somewhere. It can actually become a generic way of living itself. Problem is just that something that you probably do that. I'm just trying to kind of change our own attitude towards problem. Then we have categorical problem. Car won't start. They're very specific, formulaic, procedural way of fixing the problem, right? Or analyzing the problem, fixing the problem. The building is cracking. Very categorical. You know why, the few causes why it could start cracking. So those problems have already been dealt with. And again, actually, they're not so interesting. Incidental problems, categorical problems, though I say, let's change our attitude towards problem, they're really not interesting. What is interesting is when you start facing some constraint. Something prevents you from doing something, right? Something is blocking a change that we want. That is a constraint problem, which means there is a constraint. If you find a constraint, you have to jump with joy, because fixing the constraint is actually innovation. Overcoming a constraint is innovation. So, we actually, when you're saying we want to solve problems, the first step is to start looking for constraints. And more challenging the constraint, actually the chances of you doing something very creative is actually much more. If you kind of find weak constraints, you're going to solve it only with weak ideas. But if you find strong constraints, you will solve the problem with stronger ideas. Okay, this is the principle that the methodology of Chris uses as well. Constraint identification becomes paramount. And then there are wicked problems, right? Climate change, dirty streets, traffic problems, in which humanity hasn't learned to fix those yet. Actually, we can try all kinds of things, but we really haven't figured out a way to address very, very large wicked problems, in which solving the problem creates new problem, or we don't even or there are too many variables to kind of change, right? So there's not something that you can fix at one end and everything falls into place. So we as human beings have come to this very advanced civilization today without actually knowing, even today, because nobody's got answers, okay, to fix the traffic problem in Bangalore. Nobody's got answers. Or, the fact that we litter the streets and, nobody's got answers. So I think this is a dimension that, we have to address at a very different level. But constraint problems are there, and they're very interesting for us. And once you identify a constraint, then it becomes fun. So how do you solve a constraint? Do you use all the brute force at your command? Like Sudhakar said, no, generative AI. Now that we have a brute force called AI, is it going to solve all the problem for us? Hold the thought, okay? Just hold that thought. See, end of the day, we need to use some form of thinking to solve, right? And then there is all this talk about right brain versus the left brain, and analytical thinking versus the creative thinking. Are they friends? Are they very different from each other? Is it as simple as that? Trying to, sort of move from analytical to creative, or, maybe use both. Maybe, lot of us, there are a lot of today, there are a lot of people who can use both the right and the left brain, right? So is that the solution, or is it as simple as that? But there's just, see, thinking in binary is not going to get us anywhere. If you think, analytical thinking, creative thinking is only two types of thinking. You either do this, or, maybe do both. It's not that. I can easily think about so many other ways of thinking. And this is just a very small list. I'm sure there are ways of thinking we even haven't even discovered or formulated as yet, right? You can see some people have the ability to think strategically, because, address that very strategic. How do we find out that very simple strategic aspect of how to solve a problem? Not the tactical aspect of solving a problem, but the strategic aspect of solving a problem. Is there something called comparative thinking? Maybe you kind of, innovate and get creative by comparing things. So there is a lot. It's complicated. It's just not. It's not about thinking. Actually, it's just not about simply thinking or thinking styles or thinking methods. It gets even more complicated than that, right? Because thinking, most of it happens in our subconscious. Creativity is actually a subconscious behavior. It's not a conscious behavior. Analysis is a conscious behavior. Imagination is subconscious. Self-awareness, knowing ourselves is subconscious. All our beliefs, values, the patterns that, we form about the world, we understand the world in patterns. Everything is subconscious. So it gets even more complicated, doesn't it? You can't just say, hey, teach me how to think like this or think like that. It is more than just a very, very specific kind of thinking. So it's all lost. Is there no hope? Is it too complicated for us to go anywhere? Like what are we? So how do we respond to that question, right? We try to form all kinds of methods, all kinds of techniques and methods and structures and processes, and then we pump the problem that is in front of us with all the tactical methods that we have, and hope that the balloon, which is a problem, bursts in the right place. That's the best we do, because we haven't really eliminated any problem. Take the last 100 years, have we really eradicated a problem in full? We haven't, right? So we just try to address something, we try to put all the force of our own knowledge onto it and just pray actually that we hit the right spot. It bursts in the right way. It's as actually this is my very personal point. Okay, there's one disclaimer here. It's a very very personal take on problem solving, but bear with me till the end, and then we can probably have a good argument. Okay. So I think we just bumbling. Human beings are just bumbling away. But there is a way. All hope is not lost. Okay. So I am saying it's not the method; it is the brain. If we sharpen our brain, right? If we sharpen our brain into very specific avenues of thinking, not one kind of thinking or two kinds of thinking, but generally very broadened ways of thinking, that could be the best way to become good problem solvers. So I'm a designer. I teach in a design school, and design as a discipline is very very unique. For those of you who haven't experienced it, it is not what it's made out to be. Design as in particular set of skills, or doing wireframes or layouts, or intuitive, improving our intuitive capability to do great task flows, anticipating user behaviors. It's far far beyond that. Okay, because design is also a certain way of being. you know it is we think more visually than verbally, and formulas. Empathy is so misused today. It's, I mean, like, we think, that if you compile a couple of statements from, people we talk to, we can understand the problem. But we really can't, how do we really get as close as we can to, someone else's situation? How do we cultivate that faculty in our heads? How do we get confident about ourselves? Can you tell there's no problem that I cannot solve? Can we reach that state of confidence? Can our minds be really, really agile? I mean, jump from one thing to another, because when you're solving a problem, we're getting inputs from, 10 different sources. And somewhere making these, connections, all these permutations or combinations, which you try to do it in your conscious brain, but then ultimately the subconscious brain will throw this great, amazing thing. So to create that agility itself, among our neurons, our brain can be reshaped, right? If you'll have heard of something like called neuroplasticity. So if you're a certain kind of thinker, we can change the brain. In fact, in design school, after the end of first year, most design students have a new brain. They don't have an old brain anymore, because all the neural networks have changed the pathways in the head. So sharpen the brain. Sharpening the brain means changing the structure of how we have been trained to think, analyze, visualize, ponder, decide, evaluate. Even intuition is a subconscious thing, but it is always force fed from the conscious side. We have to look at the problem, and the problem, that's called priming, right? You prime your brain with a problem, and the subconscious will actually throw the result. But you're constantly kind of triggering the subconscious. You're forcing the subconscious, right? So it's not methods. My big statement today is that it's not methods. Methods are all there. Methods can help you force the subconscious, and that way they are still relevant. I'm not saying they're not relevant. But actually, when you go, and solve a problem, right, you'll see that it's actually not the method at all. Okay, a method is just some things that you do to kind of kill time till your brain comes with an answer. So I'm the first kind of at least hint of a solution for ourselves, for humans. I'm not talking about you, me, and a couple of people. For us as humans, okay, is that one is that we sharpen our brain. Everybody has a sharpened brain with very very specific ways of operating. Okay. Second thing is that we change our attitude. This is probably the biggest barrier to kind of finding solutions, because we're trying to look for a solution. You don't look for a solution. You look for all the ways that which all the possibilities towards that solution, and you address those possibilities. That is actually a better way. We want to kind of package a solution, put a price tag on it, and create a startup around that, right? But it's actually it has to work as a huge collective adaptive system, in society to really work. And we have to understand that it's very many small fixes ultimately kind of work, and all the possibilities have to be addressed. It is not one solution actually. The second big barrier is we're trying to get things right. Don't bother about getting it right. Just do the next step. That's all it requires. Because doing the next step actually kind of primes your brain, your subconscious is triggered to do better. You also learn doing, and it's ultimately more efficient in terms of resources, in terms of money, in terms of effort, everything. Even though you start and redo and redo and redo and improve for many stages, ultimately, we've experienced this across, and at least in design school, it's so proven and it is so established that doing it through small series of small improvements is much better than one trying to get it right. So this is another huge process step. So the first one was, I'm talking about, something, the very paradigm shift in how we think about, problems. Second thing is about, an attitude that, we as a society have to cultivate. And third, I'm talking about a process in which, towards which we have to move. Because if you talk, people, let's say I'm a farmer, right? I own farms. So, farming, do they apply, design thinking consciously? Do they apply a very, very structured process? It's very, very organic. Every day they encounter problems, and then they fix it very, very slowly, and it's fixed. And today, the whole kind of culture of farming, the whole tacit knowledge of farming comes from years of fixing and fixing and fixing and improving. So that's the way to do it. And the fourth thing is, it is a style. So second one was about, an attitude. The third one was about a process. Now, fourth, I'm talking about a style, right? So, especially you, I think from Google Groups, and I mean your hero, your hero company, right? Google. Google's so data-driven, right? Even in design, they're so data-driven. If they want to put a button somewhere, they kind of use data. They test, they get analytics, they use data. So that's the deductive way of doing it. Try to ask why and then try to do how. But abductive way of doing it is to ask what if. See, this is actually one of the biggest paradigm shift that's happening in thinking. And when you talk about thinking about the future thinking, till today was always concentrating on what is the probable. Today we are like this: what is likely to happen tomorrow, right? But we never thought about what is preferable. What do we really want for tomorrow? If you all start thinking about, what we want for tomorrow rather than what is going to happen tomorrow, then slowly we shape our future into the way we want. So this is a style. This is a huge philosophical shift in terms of moving from plausible, probable, possible to actually preferable. This is a mind blowing framework that to thinkers have created in UK Royal College of Arts. But the abductive way of thinking, which is to ask what if and follow the what if scenario. And okay, don't even talk about today's solution, right? What about talking about tomorrow's non-solution? Okay, it's as a status quo. What if we say tomorrow is clean streets? What if tomorrow is clean streets? What if people, and then work backwards sometimes. It all can be done because we do it. We do it every day in design schools. So design is more than very set of principles and tactical rules and some structures like that. Okay, design is much more attitudinal. It is actually shaping the brain. It is something that we've been doing fundamentally since we were Stone Age men. and then it's kind of got pushed aside, and now it's coming back into a more formal structures. But it is not there. We're trying to get back to the root way, the more fundamental, rooted way of how humans think, right? And finally, just want to leave you all with this. So we said, see, look, to solve problems is not so very easy because, etc., right? It is I'm saying, not we said, I'm saying that, right? And I'm saying maybe if we follow some certain very radical shifts, we can think better. And if you can think better, we become better problem solvers. And so it's a collective, it's a collective thing that we all have to address in society. So we talked about brute force, right? You look at constraints, and then you look at all this power of technology and artificial intelligence and supercomputers and parallel processing and quantum processing nowadays, right? And we're thinking, all this power will give us solutions. But here I have an example of one guy whom I know, and I think who is actually on the call today. Maybe we can kind of ask him to introduce himself if he's still there. He's done this amazing little thing, okay, right? So he's studying right now at Central St. Martin's, University of Arts London. He studied in Coimbatore. He's a fellow Coimbatorian. Okay, let me say that first. He's a fellow Coimbatorian. So he's holding a keyboard. Okay. Now I want to ask you all a couple of questions. Now we can get a little interactive. Okay. So can we make a zero carbon keyboard? Not zero carbon, negative carbon. It means manufacturing of this keyboard actually takes away carbon from the environment rather than, produces carbon dioxide due to the process of manufacturing. Is it possible to create a carbon negative keyboard? Every keyboard you make contributes to global cooling, not global warming. Is it possible? Anybody? Anybody wants to come? Yes? How, Leo? It's good. I love the fact that you said yes. Because we have to ask these questions, okay? These impossible questions, right? And this guy asked this question. And he actually delivered on it. This keyboard is actually carbon negative. Yeah, but you're talking about, algae eating CO2, but he's talking about a keyboard which is actually eaten up CO2. So this keyboard he's holding is one of the things he's achieved here is that it is carbon negative. Okay. Number two that he's achieved is, so he's also a big fan of right to repair. Why are we kind of throwing away things because one part failed? So this keyboard is made out of 678 parts, all of which he made and he assembled into a working prototype of a keyboard. Okay, this is a working prototype. It's a mechanical keyboard, which gamers and all that use, right? So he asked this question. I mean, he's a big fan of the fact that we need to repair our things and not throw them away. So there is not a single screw used in the assembly of this keyboard. Yeah, we'll come to that. He's going. I'll ask him to talk about his thing itself. So this keyboard doesn't have a single screw, and you pull out 4 rods, and you can actually replace any component in this keyboard. The third thing is the material that he's used is a special material which actually has carbon black. That's the reason it is carbon negative. It is a polymer. It's a special polymer. It is infinitely recyclable. It does not degrade with subsequent cycles of recycling. So he is also talking about a concept called material banking. Every time you buy any object, you actually bought something that has resale value actually as a material itself. So he's talking about true circularity that way. That you buy an object, then you can resell the material. Material goes back into the slipstream of the production, right? The material inputs required Next day it might become a car bumper, it could become anything, right? So he's actually made this. He's actually made this actually quite an impossible thing. So it's not brute force. There's no technology here. It is just intensity. It is just passion. And I chose to call it, I want to put a label on it and call it extreme design. You just target something like that, go after it with all you have, and you get it. It's not possible. There's no brute force here. It is just passionate interest. It is just saying, there is a way. That's the whole beauty of this whole thing. And to do that, you know what you do. If I ask Kaushik, hey, do you use any process? Kaushik, can you just come on video, please? Yeah, there he is. So do you use any processes? He's because he, as a student, he's been the most unprocessed guy ever. You're on mute? Are you on? No, you're still on mute. I can't hear you.
Kaushik, you can try muting
Yeah.
and unmuting yourself. Sometimes that works.
You guys hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I think like Sudhakar sir said, you are taught design textbook processes, the design process itself. How do you start with ideation and things like that? But it doesn't really apply to a lot of challenges and problems that you're trying to solve. So in my case, everything along this step and journey was designed and innovated by me, like in order to achieve these goals. And it's more than following a process. It's basically what I did was reacting to every blockade that I was facing, and not reacting, I would say responding to, and doing that in a very systematic way. So that was not really a process like how Sudhakar sir was just now telling. Like sometimes processes can't they're kind of like a fail safe to delivery, but if you really have a noble idea and a noble goal that you want to achieve, many processes may not allow you to do so. So I think like the presentation was echoed, I think sharpening the brain and really being instinctive and responsive through the journey was what would help, and that's I think what helped me. Yeah. Yes, sir.
See, the process is actually, for plan B, according to me, using all these techniques, thinking, design thinking. See, what is design thinking done is at least popularize the fact that, everybody can be creative, okay, and innovative. But, that's all a plan B, according to me. End of the day, we use all the process, but then the solutions always comes from somewhere we don't know, and suddenly, right? So yeah, that's it from me, and I just want to just spend the rest of the time discussing. Anybody who has questions, anybody has a point of view. See, all of us can do that, okay? And the very, very simple tricks to kind of, improve, sharpen your brain. It's something. It's what I think. I'm just leaving you with, like I said, leaving you with the start of a journey where if you want to be. If you want to sharpen your brain, you want to be innovative, you want to have creative confidence, you really want to solve problems, right? Go there and solve problems. This is how you have to start thinking. Not look for easy templatized solutions, but be a better problem solver.